Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. This is Amanda. I will be today mediating the talk of Professor Haike Jacobs. Professor Haike Jacobs, today at Professor Haike Jacobs studies sounds and accentuation in languages. He wants to know, for example, what knowledge speakers have about the sounds in their language. Unconsciously, they do a number of things in a systematic manner, for example, pronouncing words, using the correct accentuations, questions such as how this knowledge can be represented in a model, how children acquire this knowledge, and how and why languages change, serve as guidelines in Jacobs' research. Jacobs is from Radboud University, my alma mater as well, and he is a professor in French linguistics, right? In the French department at Radboud University. So he is here today to speak to us. And Professor Haike, I think you can now turn your mic and your video on to give us this talk. So thank you very much for being here, for accepting this invitation of Abralim ao Vivo. Thank you, Miguel, for this great, exceptional initiative by Abralim under your direction, right? So thank you, Professor Haike. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So I'm going to share my screen and hope you can all see it.
Yes, it's appearing, yeah. Maybe you could put it in full screen? Yes. Great, thank you.
Do you all see my screen?
Yes, it's full screen. It's showing. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So my talk today will be about the status of what is in phonology called the mora. And what I will claim is that moras are only about length, but not about weight. And so the expression of syllable weight in terms of moras leads to two major descriptive problems for phonological metrical theory using iambs and trochees to describe stress. And to briefly illustrate these two terms, iambs and trochees. So a trochee is a foot with initial prominence, and an iamb is a foot with final prominence. So the idea is that speakers typically what they do, if there is rhythm in the language, they will analyze syllables as being part of phonological feet. So if you take, for instance, a Brazilian Portuguese word like cafezinho, then you have a first foot café, the second foot zinho, and in cafezinho, there's main stress on zin, the third syllable, and a secondary stress on the first one, the cafezinho. So that would typically be two trochaic feet with initial prominence each, ka and zin, and then final stress, the last trochee, will be the foot with main stress. The other type of language that you can get, if you look at the 7,000 languages that are spoken around the world, is an iambic pattern. So that would be a foot with final prominence. So if you have an iambic language and you had that word café zinho, then it would be café zinho. So 2 feet with final prominence. Now, the first problem that we have is there are languages where close syllables count as light for stress purposes, but as heavy for foot-based segmental modifications. A case in point is Cayuga, which is a Lake Iroquoian language, and which has laryngeal metathesis, described by Hayes in his work 1995, and basing himself on descriptive work by Foster. So what does the language look like? Well, Cayuga is an iambic language. So you have feet that have final prominence, and long vowels count as heavy syllables, but closed, let's say, syllables that end in a consonant, CVC syllables, count as light. It's in a way comparable to trochaic, laryngeal, where a long vowel counts as heavy, but the closed syllable does not count as heavy. Now, this is a description given by Hayes. So first, which was in a serial metrical model, so a rule-based phonology, not a constraint-based like optimality theory or harmonic serialism, which still is optimality theory based. In a serial model, that would be just rules applying one after another, taking an underlying form and producing a surface form. So in his description, that would be first foot construction, so taking syllables, forming syllables into iambic feet. So take two syllables, stress on the second syllable, iambs from left to right. If there was a final foot, really final meaning that the end of that foot coincides with the end of the word, then that foot would be made extragrammatical. And then there would be a third rule, word layer construction, saying the last foot is the one that has main stress and not secondary stress. So here are some examples. So if you take a word like hene and a long vowel to, you get hena to was, hena to was. And here you have ehe na to wat, tewa kata, and then wenye would be made extragrammatical, or canesta. In that particular description, stress rules are ordered after rule, tonic lengthening, that lengthened is stress penultimate vowel, so pre-final vowel, in Proto-Lake Iroquoian. And the same rule with modern syllabification is assumed synchronically after the stress rules. So if you take an underlying form like e, ka, ta, to, que, to, nye, then you would do iambs left to right, final prominence, two syllables, a foot, final prominence, iamb, another iamb, and then this vowel in that pre-final position would be lengthened, so to would become to. And this observation by Hayes that in iambic languages, a stressed vowel in an open syllable is typically subject to lengthening is something that you can observe in a number of iambic languages. So here is another language, which is Chickasaw from the Muskogean family, also described by Hayes. And these data are taken from Kennedy, 2017. So what you have is underlying A, B, K, A, Sa, B, K, A, B, K, Tok, A, Sa, B, K, Tok. So you do iambic footing. So you see unstressed, stressed, a foot, unstressed, stressed, a foot, and here unstressed, stressed, a foot, and you go on doing that from left to right. What happens then is that the vowel in a stressed position, let's say the E here or the A there, is lengthened. So you get abi, asa, abi, asa. That lengthening takes place consistently in Chickasaw for every stressed vowel that is in an open syllable, but not if it is the final one. So here you have bika, non-final, so it's lengthened. Here you have bika, final, it is not lengthened. So lengthening here is limited to vowels in stressed, open, non-final syllables, by which an even iamb, so if you take asa, then you have two, let's say, short syllables, and the process then is that the first unstressed syllable remains short, but the second one that is stressed is going to be lengthened. So the process really is taking care of that an even iamb, so where the two syllables are equal in duration, is turned into an uneven one. The unstressed is short and the stressed syllable is lengthened. This lengthening of stressed short vowels in open syllables in iambic languages or trochaic languages is typologically quite common. And obviously, it's also expected, given that there is a close correlation between stress and length. So, stress, phonological stress, is often manifested by duration. So, in this cafezinho, the first stressed syllable, ka, is a little bit longer than the second unstressed one in cafezinho. So stress is typically expressed by duration, by pitch, and also by intensity. So this lengthening of stressed short vowels and open syllables, you could say that is a response to the constraint from optimality theory that is called there stress to weight. A stressed syllable, preferably, is a heavy syllable, is a syllable that has a long vowel. And by having a long vowel, that syllable has two moras, because a mora is a unit of duration. If a syllable has one mora or a vowel has one mora, it's a short vowel. If a vowel has two moras, it's a long vowel. And what we just saw here for Chickasaw, that's also observable in contemporary trochaic Italian varieties, where the stressed syllable in the stressed vowel in an open syllable typically has its vowel lengthened, or the consonant is geminated in order to make that stressed syllable a bimoraic syllable. In that model of the syllable, long vowels and short vowels have respectively two moras for a long vowel or only one mora for a short vowel. Now, long consonants, let's say the contrast that maybe you're familiar with, like Italian fatto and fatto, the past participle of the verb to do. Hanno fatto, I have done it, or fatto, faith. So the short long consonant is in that model described by the long consonant having one mora and the short consonant no mora. So syllables with long vowels or a short vowel followed by a geminate both make the syllable a bimoraic syllable, a syllable that has two units of phonological duration. The interesting point is that if we know that long consonants contribute to the moraic status of a syllable, what about closed syllables? And so what is the weight of closed syllables in terms of stress? The idea there is that there is variation typologically. So closed syllables may count as heavy for stress purposes. If they do count as heavy, the coda consonant has a mora. If not, if a closed syllable does not interfere with stress placement, the coda consonant is assumed not to have a mora. In Hayes's original derivational model, this was just a matter of parameter setting. So language could choose in terms of WBP, the weight by position, whether or not a coda consonant contributes to syllable weight. It could be set on WP plus or set off WP minus. If WP is minus, parameter is set off, the coda consonant does not have a mora. If it is set to plus, it does have a mora. So here is the minimal contrastive pair, two languages, Spanish and Polish. If you look at Spanish, the word for house is casa. If you look at Polish, the word for coffee, it's kawa, kawa, casa. No difference. In casa, two syllables, first, second, each has a short vowel, only one mora. In kawa, first, second syllable, again, two short vowels, so only two moras. And you could say, well, both languages are trochaic, so they have feet with initial prominence, and you get casa and cava. The difference now is if you look at what happens if you have a first open syllable and a second closed syllable. In that case, in Spanish, if you take a word like papel, papel, you get stress on the final syllable. If you take Polish, you get, even if the final syllable is closed, like mek, mek, it's a boy's name, you get Przemek, Przemek, stress on the first syllable. In Spanish, you get stress on the second syllable. The idea now is that Spanish has weight by position plus, and Polish has weight by position set off. So the final consonant, the K, does not have a mora. The L in Spanish does have a mora, and that mora makes the final syllable bimoraic, and the K in Polish not having a mora leaves the final syllable monomoraic. So you get in, if you do a moraic trochee, two moras, stress on the first one, Przemek. In papel, you have two moras, stress on the first one, you get papel. In an optimality theory account, that would follow from a different ranking of three relevant constraints. One is the constraint per syllable, saying that syllables should be part of a foot. Syllables must be part in a foot. The second constraint is the weight to stress principle, requiring that if a syllable is heavy, then that syllable should be stressed. And the third constraint is weight by position. A coda consonant should have a mora. Now, what these three constraints allow now is a different ranking. For Spanish, you could say, well, there is weight by position, higher rank than weight to stress. These two are higher rank than per syllable. And for Polish, you could say, well, no, in that case, per syllable is the most important constraints. And after that are coming weight to stress and weight by position. In optimality theory, there is the idea is that there are not rules applying to an underlying form and applying them serially, you will get a surface form. But that what you have is an underlying form. Let's take here again Spanish papel, and there is a constraint ranking. Weight by position more important than weight to stress, and these two more important than per syllable. For this underlying form papel, you could inspect how well the following four output possibilities, the following four possible pronunciations of that underlying form are doing in a grammar that has this ranking. So here are the four possible forms. So this first form has stress on the first one, boldface, papel. The second one also has stress on the first syllable, papel. The only difference here is that the vowel has a mora. It always has a mora. And here you see the variation. The coda consonant does not have a mora. And here it does in the second form, it does have its own mora. So the Greek letter mu indicating subscript a mora. So in Papel, the final syllable is analyzed as bimoraic, and you see no violation of weight by position because the coda consonant is analyzed as moraic. In the first form, Papel, L does not have a mora, so there is a violation, asterisk meaning violating that constraint, exclamation mark is indicating that this a possible output form is ruled out in comparison to the second or the fourth possible output form. So what you have here is in this first form, L does not have a mora, violation of weight by position. If it does have its own mora, and you get papel, papel, still stress on the first one, then there is a violation of the weight to stress principle, saying that a heavy syllable, this is analyzed as bimoraic, heavy, two moras, should be stressed, which is not the case here because stress is on the first syllable, so therefore a violation of weight to stress. And this ranking will see to it that this fourth output form, papel, where the final syllable is analyzed as bimoraic and where it is stressed, you have no violation of weight by position, no violation of weight to stress, only a violation of past syllable, because the first syllable is not passed in a foot. This is going to be the optimal pronunciation in Spanish, because here output form 1, output form 3 are ruled out. In the second column, normally there are columns, but I thought for clarity reasons, it's better to present it this way. So here the first falls out the third. If you're going to look at weight to stress, then the second is already excluded as being optimal. So there's one form left, the last one, papel. If you compare that to Polish, you have your different ranking. Now, past syllable is on top, and then you have weight to stress and weight by position. So if you take again psze, psze, przemek, przemek, and here you get Spanish-like pronunciation like przemek, przemek, stress on the final. Again, you have your variation whether or not the final coda consonant is analyzed as moraic, as in the fourth, or not, as in the third possible output form. You see that both of them have a violation of past syllable, because the first syllable is not analyzed as being part of a foot. So that means that the choice is between the first two. The first two, if you have przemek, only a violation of weight by position. The final consonant is not analyzed as moraic. If you have przemek, then you see here final consonant analyzed as moraic, and then that's a violation of weight to stress. So that distinction, whether or not a closed syllable counts as heavy or not, is expressed as a parameter in the derivational metrical model of Hayes 1995, weight by position off or weight by position on, and in an OT model, it's a question of ranking past syllable with respect to the two constrained weight to stress, heavy syllable should be stressed, and weight by position, the coda consonant should be analyzed as moraic. Now, if you're going to look at a language that is going to interest us, Cayuga, then closed syllables do not count as heavy. That means that that parameter in a derivational model, weight by position, should be set off, and that will mean that coda consonants do not have a mora. Syllables with long vowels, on the other hand, count as heavy, which means that the optimality theory ranking for iambic Cayuga is weight to stress. This is going to see that heavy syllables, Syllables that have a long vowel are stressed, more important than parsyllable, and parsyllable is more important than weight by position. Cayuga is an iambic language, and this ranking is exactly the same as a trochaic language, a Laryngeal, which is an Austronesian language. And and 1 second, I'm going to look where I am going through my notes. Now, what is problematic is that in Cayuga, what you have in the weak side of an iambic foot, let's say in the unstressed part of an iambic foot, what you get is laryngeal metathesis. So if in that unstressed part of an iambic foot you find a consonant, a vowel, a glottal stop, then that structure, syllabic structure, is changed into consonant, glottal stop, vowel. If you have before consonants or before vowels, a consonant, a vowel, and then a laryngeal fricative, H. If it occurs before a consonant, what you get is again metathesis. So you get consonant, H, vowel, consonant. If that same structure occurs before a vowel, what you get is a devoiced vowel. So you get consonant, devoiced vowel, and then a vowel. And that brings us to the question, why is there metathesis? So if you have an iambic foot like this, consonant, vowel, H, consonant, vowel, vowel, an iambic foot, here, because the coda consonant in Cayuga is not interfering with stress, it's a monomoraic syllable. The next syllable that has a long vowel is bimoraic. So you get your iambic foot, light, heavy, stress there. What you have is already a perfect canonical uneven iambic foot. And that's the first problem. Why is there laryngeal metathesis in a language like Cayuga? Or, to put it differently, how can we understand that closed syllables count as light for stress purposes, but as heavy for foot-based segmental modifications? That's the first problem I would like to discuss today. And in order to provide a description of that situation in Cayuga, what Hayes did, 1995, he proposed a two-layered moraic theory. So this is the idea. Here you have the syllable ta with a long vowel. So what you have is the onset T directly incorporated into the syllable. The Greek symbol sigma standing for syllable. The Greek letter mu for mora. The vowel being long has two moras, and two moras also on this level for stress, and two moras on this level for duration. If you have a short vowel, one mora level for duration, and one mora level for stress. Now, and here is the idea, what you can have in a closed syllable, what you could have is one mora for the vowel, one more for level of stress, but here you could have variation. You could say, well, there is a closed syllable, level for duration, one mora, but that level is not there for stress. If you use this two-layered model of the representation of moras, what you could say then, well, if you go back to laryngeal metathesis, if you take the unstressed syllable of an iambic foot, if you use this model, you could say, well, on the level of duration, really there are two moras. on the level of stress only 1. So this 1 mora makes this first syllable light and not bimoraic heavy. So in a way, you duplicate the information in your syllabic representation of that model. Now, what laryngeal metathesis does is taking this glottal stop, transposing it to become part of the onset, directly incorporated into the syllable, and what you have is a light, still light syllable, light because there's 1 mora on the level for stress, but also 1 mora on the level of duration. So this would be the formal expression of laryngeal metathesis. And Hayes then goes on saying, laryngeal metathesis converts syllables that are monomoraic only on the higher moraic layer, where stress is computed, to syllables that are monomoraic on all layers. That's what we see. Monomoraic on the higher to monomoraic on all levels of representation. And goes on to say, this is an expected outcome for the weak side of an iambic foot. Its phonological duration is reduced following the iambic trochaic law. But under a single layered moraic theory, this characterization cannot be formally expressed, since the CVC, a closed syllable, is represented as monomoraic. That's here represented as monomoraic. So he needs these 2 levels in order to characterize laryngeal metathesis. But the problem is the following. Closed syllables count already as short for stress purposes, as monomoraic for stress, and for weight considerations. So why should coda duration, for which there is in terms of stress no evidence, be deleted? So by having 2 layers of moras, the close correlation between length and stress in a way seems to be lost. So actually, what you would like to say in Cayuga is that you have laryngeal metathesis if the syllable is unstressed. But it's impossible to say that laryngeal metathesis takes place in an unstressed syllable, because an unstressed syllable already has only 1 mora. So you need that additional level in order to give any reason for why laryngeal metathesis applies. Right. So if the optimality theoretical ranking for Cayuga is weight to stress principle, higher than per syllable, higher than the weight by position, then closed syllables will not have a mora and are light. And then the question is, why should coda duration, for which is in terms of stress, no evidence, be deleted or transposed to the onset? And what I just mentioned, the connection between metathesis and stress cannot be formally expressed. So you would like to say, well, it happens in unstressed syllables, but you cannot do that because unstressed syllables means light syllables, and that's not what is going on. A similar, let's say, conundrum or a similar situation where closed syllables do not count as heavy for stress, but do count as heavy for segmental foot-based modification arise in Yupik. So what you have there is syllables that are close by a geminate count as light for stress. Now, if a geminate ends up in the weak part of an iambic foot, and only then, it is geminated. If it ends up in the strong part of an iambic foot, it is not. And this Lear guy is going to say gemination may only follow an accented vowel. Here is an example. So you have a post-base suffix with a long nasal consonant followed by ER. Is meaning stop and then the present progressive in Chugas alutic. In the strong part, if that suffix ends up in the strong part of an iambic foot, there's no degemination, like in he stopped singing, toen nicht tuk, so no degemination. If it ends up in the weak part of an iambic foot, like here, to nicht, then there is degemination. And again, the question is just like the one we had for Cayuga, why is there for Cayuga laryngeal metathesis? Why would there be degemination? Syllables closed by a geminate do count as slight for stress. And again, the answer is on the surface, the heavy light distinction works consistently across both layers of the moraic grid. So meaning that for these cases, degemination in Schwa Release, laryngeal metathesis in Cayuga, we need a two-layered model of the moraic representation. And so that's one problem. And a second problem, which is related to that, is languages where you have long vowels and geminates, but where geminates do not attract stress. And maybe this is a good point to have a short break. And then, so what I would like to do is during the presentation, this is the first break, and I would like to have, after let's say 10 minutes, I will continue, then go on and have a second break. And maybe this is a good moment in time to ask whether there are any questions. And so I will stop sharing my screen and see whether there are questions.
Thank you for a very interesting talk. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Right.
I can hear you.
There was a question for you from Professor Gladys Massini Cagliari. She says, well, it's a comment actually. In the example cafezinho you gave,
Yeah.
the syllable ka does not receive the primary stress in this case. It receives this, according to her, the secondary stress.
Yes.
If there is a stress retraction to avoid clash, for example, café plus zinho, cafezinho, then cafezinho, right?
Yeah.
So
Yes.
it will put the secondary stress in ka.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, that's I completely agree, but it just took that example to show if you have 4 syllables. I could have taken maybe a word of 4 syllables not being composed of a stem and zinhu, but let's say a 4-syllable word like Curitiba. And then I would say, well, in Curitiba, you have main stress on chi, secondary stress on Curitiba, just showing that what you do is, if you have a word of 4 syllables, it will be grouped trocheically, stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, and not in an iambic fashion.
Right. Thank you very much. And I have also a curiosity, actually. It's mine then. When you look at data from phonetics, for instance, we have the word papel, right? Papel, as you gave the example in Spanish, right?
Yes.
So, well, in phonetics, what we see is that L as a continuant, right, will lengthen the previous vowel, right? L. So, and but the lateral approximant is lengthened by itself, right? It's very long. In a position like to a word like tact, as your example, right? That the stop in coda position would shorten the vowel, right? How could we accommodate to this, what we see in phonetics and what you understand in the theoretical approach?
Well, I would say if you look at, yeah, of course that's different from language to language. But if you look at Polish, so if you take a similar case to the papel, You could take the boy's name like Pavel, Paul, and then you would get Pavel. So you would have the same final structure, L, but still stress on the first one. Or if you take a word like matador, the Spanish matador, and if you would compare it to tomato, pomidor in Polish, pomidor. So that my idea would be that you do stress, and if you have done stress, then the stress position may have different kind of segmental effects in languages.
Right.
So you
So
could
it will be
get if the vowel is stressed, it could be lengthened because it is stressed. Or you could say, well, if you have, let's say, an R or an L in Dutch, if it is closing a syllable, then it could lengthen also the vowel.
right. So you're saying that the vowel lengthening doesn't motivate the stress assignment, but the stress assignment would motivate the vowel lengthening.
Yes, yes, yes.
And that will be language specific.
Yeah, and that would be typically the case if you have rhythmic languages, if you have trochaic rhythm or iambic rhythm. So you do the stressing, and then you get some segmental modifications. And that would mean stressed vowels in open syllable typically would get lengthened. Or what you see here in Cayuga, if you have a closed syllable in a non-stressed position, then there is some modification going on. Because that closed syllable is in a non-stressed position of a foot, or because there is a long consonant in a non-stressed position of an iambic foot in Chugash Alutic, and you would get degemination. But not if that long consonant is part of a stressed syllable.
Yeah, because for instance, in gemination cases, right, of consonants, for instance, in Italian, we know that the gemination would also lengthen the vowel. So in other languages, the gemination doesn't have this effect. This is what you're saying, right?
Yes, yes.
Right.
So, and even in Italian dialects, you sometimes find that the vowel is lengthened. If the vowel is not lengthened, then you get gemination. And the same is what you see in Yupik languages. So if there is an iambic foot, so sometimes it's the case that the vowel is lengthened, or if not, then the consonant will be geminated.
Okay, thank you very much for your answers, Professor. Very nice. Thank you.
Shall we? Is it possible to have a 5-minute break and then go on? Or would you prefer me to continue?
No, would you like to have a sip of water? I think it's okay, right, Miguel? We make a short break and then we come back. 5 minutes, okay?
5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes. Yeah, okay, 5 minutes and I'll be back.
Okay.
Yeah? Okay.
Just wait for Professor to come back. He will be 5 minutes off and then he'll come back. If you have any questions, okay, don't prevent yourself. Just right here in the chat, okay, of the YouTube screening. I'll post it here again. Hello there. We are ready when you're ready.
Okay. Just going to look where I was.
We were talking about termination. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, so I stayed here and so the second problem that we have with that Morag model is you also have languages that do have long vowels and geminates, but where geminates do not attract stress. And the case in point is a trochaic language Wolof, spoken in Senegal, and Iambic Pattern that we talked about already briefly. Now, going into a little bit more detail into Wolof, this language spoken in Africa, Senegal, it has quality contrast for consonants and for vowels. So it does have long vowels and it does have long consonants and also short vowels, short consonants. So here are some examples of long vowels, short vowels. So a word like ba, si, with the long vowel, and a word like basi with a first short vowel. Or a word like need with a long vowel and need a word with a short vowel. So you see that vowel length is contrastive in Wolof. And the same for long short consonants. So a word like nop, a long consonant P, and another word nop with a short consonant P, and different meanings. So clearly contrastive. If you look at long vowels and stress in Wolof, then the generalization is that stress in Wolof is on the first syllable, as in basi or patach or jabar. If the first syllable, however, contains a short vowel and the second syllable a long vowel, then stress is on the second syllable, as in ganar or jigen. And there are, from a typological point of view, there are languages which long vowels, where nevertheless the long vowels are irrelevant for stress. And an example of such a language, described by René Kager and also by Altshuler, is Goninyandi. In Goninyandi, you see you have ba, bo, second syllable long vowel, or don, go, each syllable has long vowel. Irrespective of that pattern, there's just a binary grouping of syllables such that you take two syllables, irrespective of vowel length, and you have stress on the first. So what you have here in this is ba, stress on the first, and then a long vowel. Or this one, jambin, ba, ro, a long vowel there. And so this is quite easy to express within optimality theory. For Goninyandi, where vowel length does not interfere with stress, you would simply have to say par syllable interfeed is ranked above way to stress. A heavy syllable should be stressed. And what you get is just a binary grouping of syllables, irrespective of the internal structure of syllables. So if that's the case, you just get strictly binary grouping. Babo, dongo. In Wolof, it's not that way, because what we saw is if you have a long vowel in the second syllable, you get stress there. You get basi, you get basi. But if the second syllable has a long vowel, you get ganar. So that means that this distinction between languages where long vowels do not interfere with stress, and where they do is just a matter of having past syllable above the weight to stress principle. Or in Wolof, then it will be weight to stress principle. Heavy syllables should be stressed above past syllable. Now, if you look at Wolof, then you could say, well, a coda consonant in Wolof does not make a heavy syllable, although there are geminates in Wolof. So here you have the closed syllable, the second one, dag. This consonant that closes the second syllable does not have its own mora. So just two light syllables stress on the first one. It's petach and not petach. So in this respect, the word for bird, petach, is like Polish przemek. It's not like Spanish papel. And if you look a little bit deeper into Wolof, you could say, well, what happens there? Word internal and word final coda consonants may occur after a short vowel, as in jargon, the word for spider, after a long vowel, as in narga, it's area, place, or ganar, chicken. But a long consonant never follows a long vowel. So words like need or need that we saw in a previous slide are fine. But words like need, long vowel and a long consonant, or digo, word with long vowel and a long consonant, are not. So the syllable is maximally bimoraic, but bimoraic in a specific sense, meaning a long vowel cannot be followed by a long consonant. A long vowel can be followed by a coda consonant, which you see here, naar, ga, or ga, naar, a long vowel followed by a consonant. Which means that a long consonant has a mora, but a coda consonant has not a mora. Coda consonants and stress. So a coda consonant in Wolof does not make a heavy syllable, although there are geminates in Wolof. So what you have is this representation of the syllable. So in traditional terms, it would be the WBP, the weight by position parameter, is set to off, or it would be past syllable above WBP in an OT ranking, and you would get this structure for petach. And the OT ranking for trochaic Wolof is just the same as the OT ranking for Iambic Cayuga. So word to stress principle is ranked high, meaning that bimoraic syllables, syllables that have a long vowels, are stressed, more important than past syllable, and past syllable more important than weight by position. Means that closed syllables will not have a mora and are light for stress purposes. But this predicts that the geminates are predicted to attract stress in Wolof. Because if you look at this structure, where you see here the long consonant, the g has a mora. That mora is linked to the first syllable, and that consonant is also linked as an onset to the second syllable. So this is representation for dego, where you have the g, geminate consonant, divided over two syllables, and thus have its mora there. Because the representation in that moraic model, difference between long and short consonants, is that long consonant has one mora and a short consonant does not have a mora. So if this were a word like that go with a single consonant, then that go would not have its own mora. This means that this g makes the first syllable a heavy syllable. And that raises the question, how can that initial heavy syllable be skipped by stress purposes? If you compare it to a word where you have a first syllable with a long vowel, a second syllable also with a long vowel, in this case, me, nail, you get stress on the first. So why would it not be deg stress there, dego. So what would be dego stress on the second one? So that's the second problem. Now, in order to illustrate that those long consonants in Wolof are really long, there is one description of that language, Bell, in 2003, and who says that final geminates are realized with the post-consonantal schwa release, and that closer duration may not be as long as in medial geminates. So what I did when I was in Senegal 2 or 3 years ago, I made some recordings with the 8th speaker, and one of the 8 speakers sometimes has this post-consonantal schwa, but the other 7 really produce final geminates. So here's a speaker that has sometimes a schwa, and I will let you hear it. If you hear the first one, the nop, you really hear a difference there between the long one and the short one. And here you will hear the Schwa release, which you will hear there as well, and there as well. And then I will have a speaker where you will clearly hear that in final position, there's a difference between the long and the short consonant. But first, this one. I hope you can hear it.
Nopp, gën, nopp, dagg, daggi, gënn, dippi, jekk.
Yeah, so here, if you look at hear it, listen at this again, and you concentrate on this knob and knob, you will clearly hear a long one there and a short one there. And here you will have this Schwa release, which you will hear also in gunne and in jekke. So I'll play it once again.
Nopp, gën, nopp,
Short,
dagg, daggi, gënn,
Schwa release,
dippi, jekk.
Schwa release. And here is one that has the singleton. If you hear.
Nopp, nopp, nopp.
And the long one. And what you will hear here is a sort of almost a final
Nopp, nopp, nopp,
a sort of final fricative release,
nopp,
aspiration.
nopp, nopp,
And this one is really,
nopp, nopp,
and this one really long.
nopp, nopp.
So no schwa release there, just distinction between short and long. Now, possible solutions. So how can it be that these geminates in the first syllable are skipped by stress? That was that description by Bell. And his idea was, well, the only segments that affect stress assignments are limited to being both moraic and minus consonantal. So only long vowels count for stress, but not long consonants, because long consonants obviously are plus consonantal. And following McCarthy, 1988, that feature distinguishing vowels and consonants, plus minus consonantal, is specified at the root node, so meaning in the internal structure of a segment. It is on top of the feature geometry, defining the segmental features. And on that root node, there's not only plus minus consonantal, but also, for instance, plus minus sonorant. And there are no known languages where stress is sensitive to whether or not the syllable in question hosts a plus or minus sonorant segment. So stress in general is not sensitive to featural content. So again, the second possible solution is to have a two-layered moraic representation. That would save the case of Wolof. So you could say, well, if you have this structure, First syllable de, vowel monomoraic. The second one o, a long vowel, 2 moras. And you can say, well, here we have a geminate, so it has a mora, is linked to the second syllable, but it has only a mora here on the level of segmental duration, but not on the level where stress is computed. So that would still mean, well, here we have a light syllable, here we have a heavy syllable. So if we have a situation where weight to stress is more important than, let's say, align word left, start the word with the foot, then that would still get stress. If stress is computed on this level, stress on the second syllable. But that would mean, obviously, that we would need this, let's say, this structure, the representation, where we have two levels of representation. So we have two problems. The first one is why there is laryngeal metathesis in Cayuga, or why there is degemination in Chickasaw. So how can we understand the fact that closed syllables count as light for stress, but as heavy for foot-based segmental modifications? And the second problem is languages where you have long vowels and geminates, but where geminates do not attract stress. And that would be the case that we just discussed in trochaic Wolof or in iambic Chickasaw. And the answer to the two problems has been this two-layered Morag model. And this two-layered Morag model, in a way, seems conspicuous because it does not allow to say for laryngeal metathesis that laryngeal metathesis take place because the syllable is unstressed. And the long vowels and geminates, again, we have a similar problem. The consonants are long. Clearly, we saw that for Wolof because even in word syllable final position, they are long. And okay. So the first problem, languages is long vowels and geminates, but geminates do not attract stress. So what I would like to propose is instead of the constraints weight by position, the coda consonant must be moraic, and the constraint weight to stress, a heavy syllable must be stressed. I would like to propose two different constraints, and these constraints are quite simple. That the first one is a branching nucleus. Nucleus would then be that part of the syllable dominating vowels. So if you have a branching nucleus, you have a long vowel, a non-branching nucleus, you have a short vowel. So branching nucleus may not be in the weak position of a foot. If that's an important constraint, then that language will see to it that long vowels are stressed. And then the second constraint, a branching rhyme may not be in the weak position of a foot. Branching rhyme meaning that if there is some branching structure in the syllable, that could be branching structure because there is a vowel followed by a consonant, whether or not that consonant is part of a geminate. So the proposal basically is that moras are used for length only, to express only phonological length, but not phonological weight. So that means that long vowels have 2 moras, short vowels have 1 mora, and long consonants have 1 mora, and short consonants just have no mora. The first immediately advantage of that proposal is that you could have initial and final geminates. Initial and final geminates are just consonants that have a mora. They are not limited to being intervocalic consonant. We saw the contrastive case of Wolof nop and nop, where you have a final moraic versus non-moraic consonant. And also we know in Polish, you have a contrast like a bisegmental, ch, a monosegmental che, and a geminate che. That geminate in Polish is also subject to variation, which we will not go into here. So the idea is singleton codas do not have a mora, never, neither in Polish or in Spanish, but instead that nucleus and rhyme are constituents of the syllables, which means that we no longer have a constraint weight by position. A coda consonant must be moraic, that can be violated or not, or in derivational terms, weight by position set off or on. But what we have instead is just three constraints, possibly three. One is nucleus. A branching nucleus may not be in the weak position of foot. The second one is rhyme. A branching rhyme may not be in the weak position of foot. And finally, a bimoraic syllable may not be in the weak position of a foot. Now, if we look at the two languages, the one language that we saw above, where long vowels do not interfere with stress, we have a trochaic Koninyandi. The same pattern can be observed in an iambic language, Osage. In these two languages, that would be just binary grouping of syllables, taken care of by ranking past syllable, above rhyme, and above nucleus. If we compare that to Wolof, Cayuga, or Shugas Alutic, Wolof Trochaic, these two languages being iambic, then that would be nucleus. A branching nucleus may not be in a weak position of foot, taking care of the fact that if you have a long vowel that's going to be stressed, in Wolof, let's say cases like ganar, nigel, and then past syllable rhyme meaning that, okay, if there is a branching rhyme, a long consonant or a closed syllable in petach or in deggo, then still there will be past syllable stress on the first one. So that's, let's say, the second problem in a way is solved by giving up that idea that if you have a closed syllable, that consonant can be or cannot be analyzed as moraic. If we just return to rhyme nucleus, we can quite easily describe the effect of languages where long vowels count as long for stress, but where geminates are not relevant for stress purposes. This brings us back to the first problem, where closed syllables count as light for stress, but as heavy for foot-based segmental modifications. And this would be a point for me to have, again, a short break and allow people to have questions, to have any questions. After this short break, I will need, let's say, just some time to finish up this problem number one and then finish the presentation. So I will stop, share the screen, have a short break, and I'm very welcome to answer any questions, or provide any clarifications whatsoever.
Miguel, how long should it be? 1 hour, or we can extend it a little bit? Don't know if Miguel is here. Typically, Professor, we make it a 1 hour talk.
Okay. Oh,
I
I thought it would be like 3 hours, and then I could talk for 1 hour and a half or 2 hours, and then so I thought to have 2 short breaks. This is the second one, and then I will continue. Like I could speed up a little. I could slow down.
Are 1 hour, but I'm not sure. I should confirm with Miguel if it's okay if we. Miguel, are you there? Yeah, Professor Haike understood that the talk will be about 2 hours, 3 hours, and the talks are typically 1 hour. What do you say? Right, thank you. So we have a short break now, and then Professor Haike will continue, okay?
Yeah, but I could speed up a little bit if you want.
Miguel said that you have all the time that you want.
Okay. So I will be back in let's say 5 minutes and then finish it. And then it will take me like half an hour maybe.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah? Okay, 5 minutes.
Hello. Okay. Would you like to have some questions? I don't know, people posted questions to you. Let's see.
Yeah, but I don't see if there are any participants really.
Actually, I think most people are following via YouTube, right? The YouTube presentation.
Okay. Because
And they are posting their questions there as well. But at the moment, we have none. So we invite the audience to post your questions, right, to Professor Haike. Would you like to have some questions now or
yeah,
at the
why
end?
not? Why not? I could have some now, and then I'll just finish up my talk after that.
Questions. If you want to continue, you're welcome.
Do you want me to continue?
I think so, because at the moment we have no questions.
Okay. So I will continue. So we stayed. Yeah, it's at this point that I stayed, and so we'll go on. So back to the first problem. So I just addressed that second problem for the Morag model of the theory. We have this two-layered model. The problem that you have long consonants that do not attract stress. And back to the first problem. So closed syllable count as light for stress, but as heavy for foot-based segmental modification, where again we saw that the answer was a two-layered model of the mora. Now, the solution there is keep calm and call for Occam's razor. So get away of the two-layered model and call in harmonic serialism. Harmonic serialism is, I say, the latest version of optimality theory. And this is the model I'm going to use to address that first problem. So where closed syllables count as light for stress, but as heavy for segmental modifications. And this would need me to introduce that model, harmonic serialism, and also to motivate why that is a good model before going to use it. In harmonic serialism, it's still the same as in parallel optimality theory, but a little bit different. So again, you have your underlying form, but it's not comparing different possible surface pronunciations of an underlying form, but stepwise modifying that underlying form. And each step basically means doing one modification to the underlying form. After that step, taking the modified underlying form and passing that modified form again to the constraint ranking. So this is what it is. The first step, the first harmonic improvement, because every step, if taken, should be an improvement in harmony. The form should be getting better in terms of surface constraints. So the first harmonic improvement, going from underlying representation to surface representation, is dependent on the ranking of the grammar. And every step, as I just said, is one change at a time. And the output of every new step is input to the same constraint grammar until no further harmonic improvement is possible. And then what you have is, in terms of McCarthy, convergence on an output form. So why would that be a good modification of the theory? So why having harmonic serialism instead of parallel optimality theory? And here is why. If you look at parallel OT, and we go back to Polish, we discussed the Polish a little bit at the beginning of this presentation. So you could say if you have a word like telewizor, highly comparable to Curitiba or cafezinho, both languages, Brazilian Portuguese and Polish, being trochaic languages. So what you get in this case is televisor, main stress on the pre-final, secondary stress on the first, just what you would get in Curitiba. The ranking there would be, there's a constrained foot binarity. Feet should consist of 2 syllables. A constraint no clash, so no 2 adjacently stressed syllables, which is not relevant in this constraint. And then what you have here is visor and tele. So preferably, if you have a word of 3 syllables in Polish, the foot is stresses on the right of the foot. So if you have a word like Warszawa, you get your foot Shawa and not Warszawa. Warszawa, the word for Warsaw, because word right, a foot should end, a word should end in the foot is more important than word left. A word should start with the foot. And that would be the ranking for word right dominating word left. Relevant for Polish to get Warszawa instead of Warszawa, and also for Brazilian Portuguese. These 3 constraints, we already saw that earlier in the presentation, pass syllable higher rank than weight to stress, higher rank than weight per position, in order to get that difference between the Przemek and Spanish papel, or in order to get pomidor comparing to Spanish matador, where dor you get the final stress. Now, if you look at the word televisor, then this ranking is going to produce this output form. Secondary stress on T, tele, main stress on V, televisor. And you see there's only one violation here, violation of weight per position. Here is a closed syllable. That coda consonant does not have its own mora. Here I have an output form where R has a mora. And if you have stress on V, then 2 violations of passed syllable, 2 syllables not passed, violation of weight to stress, because stress is on V and not on the heavy syllable Z. And the word left, 2 syllables are not footed, starting from the left word edge. So 2 syllables not footed from the left word edge. So this is going to be the optimal output form. So this is fine. Televisor. This ranking does exactly what it needs to do. It's going to produce televisor, not 2 unfooted syllables. Televisor, not televisor, not televisor, and not televisor. If you look at that same ranking and you take a word that has 2 open syllables and a closed syllable, then what you could do in parallel optimality theory, you could produce an output form where you have made the R moraic, the coda consonant of the final syllable, and you could have something that looks like Spanish matador, matador, pomidor, pomidor, which is not the output form in Polish, but as you can see, it has no violation at all. No violation of foot binarity. All feet consist of 2 moras or 2 syllables. No violation of clash. There's no two adjacent stressed syllables. No violation of word right. The word ends in a foot. No violation of past syllable. All syllables are passed. No violation of way to stress because this heavy syllable is stressed. No violation of weight by position. The coda consonant is analyzed as moraic, and no violation of word left. This is not the correct output form. It should be pomidor, the sad face here, number 3. Sad face here, number 3 is a violation of past syllable, a violation of weight by position, and a violation of word left. So there's no way in which parallel OT could make output form number 3 the winning output form. Of course, you could add a number of imaginable constraints that would rule out number 1 and would favor number 3. But then again, the constraints that you might be able to think of, you could, in a different ranking, you could place these imaginable constraints in the lower place and still have the same problem. So the problem here is if you happen to have not a word with 3 open syllables followed by a closed one, but a word with 2 open syllables followed by a closed one, you could come up with this form, which is going to be the winning form, no violation at all. So no way in which any of these other output forms could possibly beat that first winning form. Now, this is impossible in harmonic serialism. Why? Because stressing in harmonic serialism takes place also step by step, meaning that the first harmonic improvement, going from underlying representation to surface representation, which in the case of stress simply is the first foot that you can assign is the going from underlying to surface representation. The first foot again is dependent on the ranking. So if you look at the first foot in underlying po, mi, do, what could be the first foot? Let's have a look. You could assign no foot at all. The first output candidate here. So we have po, mi, do. We leave it unchanged and have po, mi, do without any grouping of syllables into feet. There's this constraint had, meaning a word should have a head, a prosodic head, a foot, violated here. No foot visible in this first output form. In 2, in 3, in 4, and 5, there is a foot pommy. In 3, there is a foot dog. In 4, there is a foot dog. And in 5, there is a foot midog. Now, if you take pommy, the first 2 syllables footed, that's going to be ruled out by word right. Word right meaning that the right edge of a word should coincide with the right edge of a syllable. Here, the right edge of a foot. The right edge of a foot, me, is not coinciding with the right edge of a word, so a violation of word right, 1 syllable. 1 syllable separating the hatch mark here from the foot mark there. In output form 3, doch, no violation of word right because the right side of the foot coincides with the right edge of a foot. And the same for output form 4. Right edge of a word coincides with the right edge of foot, and for 5. So word right is ruling out number 2. Number 4, for me, dog, is ruled out by foot binarity. Here we have a foot that consists of only 1 mora. Foot binarity says a foot should consist either of 2 moras or 2 syllables. So ruled out here. This is a perfect foot in terms of foot binarity, number 3, because it's bimoraic. The foot consists of 2 moras. And here the foot consists of 2 syllables. Again, 5 and 3, no problems of foot binarity. So after foot binarity, after clash and word right, the battle is on between 3 and 4. Which of these one is going to be the best one? Well, per syllable in pomidor, only 1 foot, or pomidor is going to say, well, pomidor is the better one because it has 1 violation of per syllable less. Here you have 2 syllables, 2 violations of per syllable, 2 syllables not passed in a foot, and here only 1 syllable not passed in a foot. This means that there's no other way than to start footing this word in this way, as to say, well, midor is the best first possible foot. Hope. Then you could go on doing that, and you could take this form again into the same grammar, and you could say, well, can we still foot po? No, because that would be a violation of foot binarity and no harmonic improvement. So this is going to be the first possible, the best first possible foot. And this is going to be the form on which there is convergence. Now, with harmonic serialism, the global power and the problems of parallel OT are reduced and solved, as illustrated above for Polish. And it also allows for straightforward analysis of laryngeal metathesis and Cayuga and degemination in Chickasaw Alutic, which is why I needed to introduce harmonic serialism first. Now let's turn to our problem number 1. Closed syllables count as light for stress, but as heavy for foot-based segmental modifications. So how does it work? We already saw that Wolof has a ranking: nucleus, per syllable, rhyme. Only syllables with long vowels will attract stress, but closed syllables or geminates do not. Now, Cayuga has the same ranking. The only difference with Wolof is that iambic dominates trochaic. So Cayuga is an iambic language, whereas Wolof is a trochaic language. So it also has this ranking: nucleus, per syllable, and then rhyme. Which means that after footing as the first step, this grammar, nucleus, per syllable, rhyme, is going to turn this underlying form, consonant, vowel, glottal stop, consonant, vowel, vowel, is going to say, well, the best way to analyze that, giving nucleus, per syllable, and rhyme, is to analyze that as an iambic foot. So nucleus not violated, there's no long vowel in the weak position of a foot. Per syllable, all 2 syllables are passed, and rhyme, no long or no branching rhyme may occur in the weak part of the foot, is violated here, but given per syllable, this is the best possible footing. After that is done, this output form of the first step is then further inspected for possible harmonic improvement. Now, if we assume that the constraint rhyme, no branching rhyme in the weak part of the foot, is dominating linearity, no metathesis. That is, if it is more important to avoid having a branching rhyme in the weak part of the foot than to avoid metathesis, so no branching rhyme dominates linearity, what will happen then is that the iambic foot of the first step can be modified by the laryngeal metathesis next step. So if you have this structure after the first step, this foot, if you have the ranking rhyme dominating linearity, if you transform it in this way, then rhyme will be satisfied and linearity will be violated, but it will be harmonic improvement. So metathesis is then an harmonic improvement given that the constrained rhyme is no longer violated. And the relation between metathesis and stress is now formally expressed. There is metathesis because the foot is improved. There is metathesis in the unstressed part of a foot because the unstressed part of a foot can then be improved. And the same holds for degemination in Chugash Alutik. Degemination is an harmonic improvement given that the constrained rhyme is no longer violated, and if rhyme is ranked above max mora, do not delete moras, then again, the relation between degemination and stress can also be formally expressed. There is, again, degemination because the foot that has been constructed as a first step can be improved as a second step. And that is summarizing my talk. So the two problems that we saw, the fact that closed syllables count as light for stress, but as heavy for segmental modifications, the fact that long vowels count as heavy for stress, but long geminates do not count as heavy for stress, they would require, let's say, a multiplication in terms of representation, the two-layered Morag model can be easily circumvented by invoking harmonic serialism and just replacing these constraint weight by position and weight to stress by the constraint rhyme and constraint nucleus, and by assuming that moras are only relevant and are only needed to express length, but are in no way relevant to express a syllable weight. So to summarize, no need for two-layered Moraic theory, which is a simplification of the theory. No different durational specifications for geminates, long for segmental purposes, but short for stress. And we have arrived at a straightforward analysis of Wolof stress. No different durational specification for coda consonants, saying that a coda is in Polish in a way different than a coda in Spanish. They are both the same. They both have the same in terms of what they are, duration. But that duration is not phonologically relevant. It's just a matter of structure. And a straightforward account and explanation for Cayuga metathesis and for Chugash Alutik degemination. And this is basically what I wanted to talk about in my talk. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very, very much, Professor, for this very interesting and very thorough analysis that you're doing here today for us. I would like to, I don't know if the audience here on YouTube would have questions. Now it's the moment, right? I personally have a couple of questions for you, but let's see if more people have. So people are thanking you. Professor Ubirata is thanking you very much. Ubirata Alves. Well, I have a question, for instance, if we were to generalize, Professor, this weight to stress principle is not actually weight but length, right? As you showed us in this explanation today. But it's not clear for me if it would, how would it be the relationship with stress overall in languages, like universally speaking? Could it be applied?
Yeah, I would say if you have languages where you have long consonants, like Wolof or Yupik, and where the long consonants do not interfere with stress, do not attract stress, then the previous models, they all have a problem. So there's no way to rescue a heavy syllable, because by definition, a geminate has a mora, makes a syllable bimoraic, so there's no way to skip that bimoraic syllable. So in a way, what you would like to do is say, well, you have a long consonant, it has a mora, but stress is can in languages only look at branching nuclei, can look at the branching rhyme, or can look at the bimoraic syllable. So the typology that I would predict is that you have languages where neither long vowels nor geminate consonants nor closed syllables play a role, like Goninyanda and Osage, trochaic and iambic. You can have languages where long vowels, closed syllables, and long consonants do interfere with stress, like classical Latin, like Hirkayana, iambic, trochaic. And you can have languages where only long vowels play a role, but not closed syllables, like trochaic lineal or iambic Cayuga. And you can have languages where only long vowels play a role, but not closed syllables or geminates, like Wolof or a Yupik. And so what you could possibly have is languages where only long vowels, long consonants, but not closed syllables play a role. And there I would need my third constraint. Bimoraic syllables may not be in the weak part of a foot. So that would be the bigger typological picture.
Yeah, this is important, right, for us to generalize as well. But something that I really enjoyed in your theory, sorry, my dog, is that you put stress in a more relevant position than the lengthening. Like the lengthening would be subjected to the attribution of stress. Can I say that?
Yes, and that would be also dependent on the language. So if you take Italian or Dutch, you could say, well, is there any length in Dutch? No, not really. We stress our syllables. If we have a stressed syllable, then typically that vowel will be lengthened, as in Italian. And you have languages where you have your long and your short vowels contrastively, like Latin or Wolof or whatever, and where it may be the case or it may not be the case that stress is sensitive to whether vowels are long or not. We know that stress was sensitive to it in Latin. We know stress is sensitive to it in Cayuga, in Yupik. And we also know that it is not sensitive to vowel length in Oninyandi and in Osage. So that's what you can have typologically.
I like this analysis very much because also I could prove this relationship with this, because typically in phonology you would have the opposite said, right? Like weight to stress would be a motivator for stress assignment, right? So
Yes. So
I like the opposite. I like your analysis in the sense that I could also see that in big data, a big data analysis that I've done, like with 3 languages that are typically understood to be lexically stressed, right? And then I could see that actually the data said that what you had was stress motivating a lot of processes going on at syllable level, not the other way around. That was the data telling us, right?
Yeah.
So what you're showing here is goes towards what I could see also in the data for Brazilian Portuguese, American English, and British English. But yeah, there, if you see the typical analysis in phonology, they would say the opposite, right?
Yes, I know. Yeah. Yes.
That was very interesting, and thank you very much. It was great knowing a little more about your work and having you here today. Abralim, thanks you very much as well. And for the moment, we don't have many questions going on in the audience, but I also put here the link to your university webpage, right? The Roundabout University webpage. And if people have questions to you, they may direct to your email as well, right?
Sure. Yep.
It was very interesting, and it will be available in YouTube for anyone, so you can also let other people know, right?
Yes. And could you also send me at some time the link in YouTube to watch it back?
I can.
To see how I did?
It was very good. I liked it. But it's also nice for other people. Sometimes you don't have time to watch at the time that is being
I know.
Given, right, the talk, but then you may also have a look later.
Okay, good.
Thanks a lot.
Okay. So I can leave now?
Yeah, for the moment, yes.
Okay.
And we thank you.
Yeah, okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Have you here.